Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap up. Before I get into that, I just want to show off my shirt. It's Halloween and I have a book related shirt on. Hold on. Anyways, so yes, that's the first thing I wanted to do. The second thing I want to do is talk about how I'm going to be taking a break in November. I put that in the subject line. The title of this video. Oh my gosh, I think this shows how exhausted I am. So yes, I put it in the title of the video so that way people are aware. But I'm going to take November off from making videos. I've talked about on this channel multiple times about how I'm exhausted. I'm feeling a little bit of burnout. I'm also just noticing little things about me and the way that I've been interacting with the internet, and I've been like making some adjustments. I've been spending less time on social media in general. No one probably would have noticed this, but I've really like reined in how much I've been posting. I haven't been looking in like anyone's Instagram stories lately. I've been like barely checking Twitter. I've removed the apps from my phone to like give my brain a break and to like break some of the habits. And so I think I'm going to kind of continue that through November. I'll still be like posting a little bit on Twitter and Instagram, but definitely not at the frequency that I used to. I won't be like looking at that many feeds like I used to. So if you post things on your Instagram stories and you know I follow you, I probably won't see it in the month of November. If you tag me in things, I probably will see it, but that's probably the only way I will know if I need to see something. Like I said, I'm still gonna be on it, but just like not as much. I've really like pulled back, and I think that that's helped me a lot with my own just sort of like concentration and energy levels and just all of these different things. I'm definitely gonna be back. I'm not like making this a permanent break or anything like that. I plan on like taking November off and then doing Vlogmas in December. Is that a terrible way to do these things? I don't know, maybe. And then in December, I'll probably like adjust again how I'm doing social media, because I don't plan on like leaving forever, because I still enjoy it somewhat, but I can tell that I'm a little bit burnt out from just everything going on. So yes, that's just sort of an FYI. So if you see me like posting things on like especially Instagram but not like replying to things, that's why, because like November is my birthday month and I do a lot of things to celebrate myself, because that's just how I roll, or to celebrate my birthday. And so I like to use Instagram as a way to like commemorate and to remember those things. So you're going to see me posting quite a bit in the month of November, especially the first couple of weeks of November. But yeah, I won't be making videos. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break. Making videos is actually like the thing that brings me the most happiness right now, but it's also the thing that I have the most control over in terms of like my output. So I'm just going to turn that back a little bit. I'll still be making videos over on Book Riot because, you know, that's my job. But this channel will be on a 1-month hiatus. I'll be back on December 1st for Vlogmas, so I will see you guys then. So yes, if you have questions about that at all, leave a comment down below. Feel free to follow me on like I said, on the social media if you feel like seeing what I'm up to over the course of the month, or follow me on Goodreads if you want to see what I'm reading, because I definitely will continue updating that with the books that I'm reading. All right, so now that I have that spiel out of the way, let's get into the books I read this month. So I'm definitely getting back into the swing of reading like I used to, which makes me so happy because there was a little part of me that was slightly concerned that my brain was going to be broken forever. I have started getting back into the swing of reading. So the first book I finished in October was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is a young adult fantasy series, and I've heard a lot of people talking about this one on BookTube and really enjoying it, and so I decided to give it a read myself. So in this story, you are following this character named Jude, who her parents get killed by a fairy, and her 2 sisters were taken away to this like fairy land. And it turns out that like one of her sisters is actually only her half sister, and she's like part fae or something along those lines. But Jude and her younger sister are like 100% human, but they are like forced to live in this land. However, Jude actually wants to like live in this land and be a part of her stepfather, whatever, the person who killed her parents, like his court and things like that. But the Fae don't really like humans very much, and there are some specific people who particularly don't like Jude. And so Jude gets involved in sort of like this bigger thing going on, and then stuff happens. I don't want to give too much away of the plot. So yes, I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. This book was really good because it was like fast-paced enough that when I was going through like this weird reading mood, it like kept my attention and it made me want to keep going. But there were a lot of elements of this book that I didn't really enjoy, specifically all of the romance. I had no interest in all of the like political intrigue and all of that stuff. I was super, super into, but every time like the romantic storyline would like take prominence, I got really bored. And I think I mentioned this in one of my Friday Reads videos this month, but like the romantic storyline has a very like Pride and Prejudice template to it, which to me made it seem like it was so obvious what the story was doing and where the story was going to go. So I think that also took some of the enjoyment out of it as well. So yeah, like I said, 3 out of 5 stars. It's not terrible. And I think I am going to keep reading the series just because I'm really intrigued again by like the whole like political intrigue part of the storyline. And I think that this will also just be like another one of those books that's really good for when I'm feeling kind of slumpy or I want something more fast paced. Generally, I don't love young adult fantasy, but there are a handful of series that I do really enjoy. So I think that again, I'm going to keep going with the series, but I don't love it quite as much as everyone else does. All right, the next book that I read was The Satyr Moonstone by Sujata Massey. Now, Sujata Massey wrote The Widows of Malabar Hill, which came out, I want to say, in January of this year. I really enjoyed that book, and when I saw that there was a digital arc of the second book in the series available on Edelweiss, I immediately requested it and I got approved, and this came at the perfect time because this is basically the book that took me out of my reading slump. So if you aren't aware, this is a historical mystery series. It takes place in 1920s Bombay, and you are following this woman named Perveen who is basically like the first female lawyer in Bombay, and she works at her father's firm, and she specifically works on cases like with women and dealing with women, since she can interact with women in a way that most men can't, especially during this time period. So in this book, she gets asked by the government to work on this dispute that's happening in this one specific area called Satyr, and it's the royal family seems to have gotten into some very bad luck. The Maharaja died of an illness suddenly, and then soon after his teenage son died during a hunting trip. And so now the two people in charge are the two Maharanis, the Maharaja's mother and then his wife. And they have very different ideas of what they want the next son, the next in line, to do. The older Maharani wants the boy to be raised in the palace and to just be taught by tutors and things like that. The boy's mother wants him to go off to to an English school in England, so that way he can learn proper English and be able to have a broader understanding of the world and be a better ruler and things like that. And so Perveen is sent there to try to figure out what exactly is going on in this palace, as well as to give her sort of thoughts about what the palace should do with this young boy and like give her recommendations and things like that. But then while she's there, she notices that suspicious things are up. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, but it's probably closer to like a 3.5 stars. I think I bumped it up because it got me out of my reading slump. But this one is significantly slower paced than the first book in the series. It feels like, I would say 60 to 70% of this book is spent just like learning about the royal family, and a lot of it is spent even just having Perveen travel to the royal family. Like that takes up a significant portion of the book, and it isn't until like the last third or so when everything starts to pick up, and that last third is really, really strong. I think that if you enjoy historical mysteries, you'll enjoy this series, because in general historical mysteries tend to be slightly slower paced. But yeah, there's something about this series that just feels so like comforting. Like it feels like a blanket being wrapped around you in mystery form. Like despite the fact that people are dying, you still feel really comforted by these books. I made a whole video over on Book Riot talking about historical mysteries and things like that, so I will link to that up above in case you are interested. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Again, I'm going to continue on with this series. Unfortunately for you guys, this book doesn't come out until sometime next year. I think right now the pub date is like January or February, but who knows if that's going to stay the same. So yes, if you haven't checked out The Widows of Malabar Hill, I highly recommend it. Again, if you enjoy historical mysteries, and then you can get ready for the second book in the series for next year. All right, the next book I finished was Locking Up Our Own: Crime and Punishment in Black America by James Foreman Jr. This won the Pulitzer Prize for Nonfiction this year, and as many of you are aware, one of my New Year's resolutions was to read through the Pulitzer Prize nonfiction winners. So yes, I picked this one up partially because my library ebook hold came in on this one, and this was also me sort of doing a primer to see if I could get into nonfiction. I talked about this a little bit in my Nonfiction November TBR, but I wasn't sure if I was going to participate in Nonfiction November because I was in such a weird reading mood and I didn't know how well I was going to fare with nonfiction, but this book just reminded me of how much I love nonfiction and that, yeah, I could do Nonfiction November. So yes, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So in this book, what James Foreman Jr. is doing is he's looking at the way that the criminal justice system discriminates and harms Black citizens in the United States, specifically through things like mass incarceration and the war on drugs and police brutality, how a lot of those things back in the day, the roots of those laws and policies were even supported by Black leadership and Black politicians. So what he does is he takes a topic like the war on drugs and he goes back to like the 1960s and he talks about how those policies were put in place, why they were put in place, and how different people in politics, specifically Black people in politics, and like even pastors and neighborhood leaders and things like that, supported some of these policies because they did see things like drugs being a major epidemic in these communities. However, they didn't necessarily realize the way that those laws would extrapolate out and the way that Black people would be significantly more disenfranchised, and not even that, but also like the way that class comes into play. One of the things I really enjoy about this book is the fact that he consistently points out that there is a class divide within Black Americans as well. So some of the policies that were put in place were supported by middle class or upper class Black citizens, but they discriminate against lower class Black citizens, and they're the ones who are seeing the most harm from these things. So yeah, each chapter is basically broken up into like a different policy, like the war on drugs or gun control or mass incarceration, things like that. James Foreman Jr. is also a lawyer, and so he pulls a little bit from his own experiences and his own sort of cases that he's dealt with and things like that. I, again, just love this book a lot. I think it does a really great job of giving an overview of different policies here in the United States in a way that's really readable and understandable, even if you're not someone who has a lot of knowledge about these cases or these laws, but the story is still really gripping. There is a lot of like policy talk in here, so it's not quite as narrative as something like Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson or anything like that. It's a relatively short book, and a significant portion of this book is just like notes. Like I think the last 100 pages or so are just like notes and references and things like that. So this book itself is only like 250-ish pages. So yeah, I highly recommend this, especially if you are someone who enjoys nonfiction, enjoys books about like social justice issues, things like that. There's a reason why I won the Pulitzer, and I'm really glad that I read it. The next book that I finished was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This is a book I got through Book of the Month, and I picked it up again because my ebook hold came in, but I also felt like it was really appropriate with the end of the month and Halloween and all of those things, because this is a little bit of a ghost story. In this book, you are following kind of two storylines. One of them takes place in 1950 and one of them takes place basically modern day. I think it's like 2014 or 2013, something along those lines. And there is this boarding school called Idlewild Hall, and it's basically a boarding school in Vermont in the 1950s for like girls who either cause trouble or have like go through something traumatic and their parents just like want to send them off and away from their previous life, things along those lines. And so you're following one storyline where you're following these 4 girls who are roommates at Idlewild Hall. And then the other storyline that you're following is this woman named Fiona. She is a journalist, and she is kind of obsessed with this place because her sister was found dead either on the grounds or right outside the grounds of Idlewild Hall. And then she finds out that someone has bought the land and bought the property and plans on reopening the school. And so she starts looking into it, and then things happen. So yeah, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed this book. I don't know why. I think it's the cover design. I thought it was going to be kind of cheesy, to be completely honest. And also knowing that it's a ghost story, I was like, you don't really know like how they're going to walk the line. Like, are they going to go full on supernatural fantasy type of thing, or is it going to play it more straight? And I think that this book toes the line really, really well. I think that the developments that happen with some of the girls are really interesting. Even though I'm someone who generally doesn't like multiple perspectives books, this was one where I really enjoyed all of the different perspectives. I think that it talks about a lot of really important topics that women and girls have to deal with and were forced to like keep silent on for a very long time. Yeah, this book is like significantly more poignant and deep than you think it's going to be, just because like you know that all of these girls who are at Idlewild Hall have gone through something or are dealing with something or something along those lines, and so how the book handles all of those issues is really beautiful. And there's also just sort of this wonderful undercurrent story of like female friendship and things like that, and even just like the way teenage girls are treated and not listened to, and all of those different things handled. It's handled really well in this book. So I know that Halloween is over by the time you're watching this, but if you want something a little bit like spooky and gothic for the fall and winter, this is actually a surprisingly really good book, and I actually highly recommend it. And then the final book that I finished so far this month is one that was on the other end of the spectrum and was a disappointment for me, and that's Number One Chinese Restaurant by Lillian Lee. This copy was sent to me by Henry Holt. Yeah, I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't really enjoy it. I was going to do the disclaimer of like, my opinions are my own, blah, 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 but I think the fact that I gave it 2 out of 5 stars speaks for itself. This is one of those books where there are multiple perspectives, and I did not enjoy it. You are following basically this like crew of people who all work or own this one Chinese restaurant called the Beijing Duck House. And so I feel like I can't even give you like a really good summary because there are so many characters and so many plot lines happening here. There are the owners, Jimmy and Johnny. I think Jimmy wants to sell the place and open up his own restaurant that's more like an upscale Chinese restaurant. However, Jimmy's older brother, Johnny, isn't really down for that, and Johnny has a daughter named Anne or Annie, who I think works at the restaurant or something along those lines, but is like caught in the closet with one of the waitress's sons who recently started working at the restaurant. That waitress's name is Nan. Her son's name is Pat. So Pat and Annie are sort of like hooking up doing this thing. Pat has gotten into a lot of trouble. I think he's only in high school, like he's 17 or something like that. And he's gotten into trouble for, I think, setting garbage cans on fire, and so they like pulled him out of school, and now he's working at the restaurant. And then Nan has this friend named like Jack, who is older, who used to work at the restaurant and got fired, I think, and then for some reason he got hired back. And Jack and Nan have like this really long history together, things like that. I think you could tell by the way that I'm doing a terrible job of summarizing this book that my main problem with this story is that there's too much going on, and this is a relatively short book. It jumps chapters a lot or really quickly, and it feels like you never get settled into any one storyline. I feel like if any of these storylines had been a book unto themselves, I would have really enjoyed it. The characters in here are really fall into that unlikable character sort of trope, which I'm not someone who generally points that out or has a problem with it, but I think the problem is that there are so many storylines in here, you don't get any sort of connection with any of these characters, or it's very hard to get a connection with these characters, or if you get a connection, then immediately the chapter changes, and then like you lose the connection and for like 3 or 4 more chapters. So yeah, I think this book just needed to be pared down to 1 or 2 of these storylines. There are some really good and interesting things happening in here. Lillian Lee can write, and she explores some really great things about the immigrant experience, about the relationships between these different generations of people, specifically like immigrants and their children, about having like hopes and dreams and ambitions for your life and seeing how things actually turn out. But again, it's just too much and too little of a space. There was too much happening and I couldn't get into it. So yes, unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy this experience very much. So I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. All right, those are all of the books I finished in the month of October. I'm currently in the middle of The Witch Elm by Tana French. I'm adoring it. I talked about it in one of my Friday reads where I was talking about how I was in a reading slump, and I knew I was in a reading slump because I couldn't get into the new Tana French book. So now that I know I'm not in the reading slump anymore, I am in it and I am really enjoying it so far. I'm only like 40% of the way through the book so far, so it feels like the story is just getting started. But since I started reading that like yesterday, and I was like, oh, it's Halloween, this feels like a good time to be reading The Witch Elm by Tana French. It's also been kind of dark and stormy in Chicago a little bit, so it's been real good. So yes, that's what I'm currently reading. I also just started reading Blood in the Water, which I talk about in my Nonfiction November TBR. I was just in the mood to start reading nonfiction, even though it's technically not November yet. Although by the time you're watching this, it is November. So yes, that is everything that I have. Feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know how your October reading went, or like what your favorite book was that you read this past month, or if you have any questions or comments about any of the books I mentioned in this video, feel free to leave that down below as well. Again, just a reminder, I'll be taking November off, so I will see you guys on December 1st when I start Vlogmas. If you desperately need to get a hold of me for some reason, you can still like tag me on Twitter and Instagram and I will see those, but I just might not be as quick to respond as I usually am. Otherwise, you can check me out on the Book Riot YouTube channel. Also, my Read or Dead podcast will also be coming out. There are links to those in the description as usual, so feel free to go over there if you are desperate to see me or hear me. That seems really weird to say, but yeah, that's there. So I'm gonna wrap it up now. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.